Help! Somebody, please! Eleanor Drake's voice cracked as it echoed through the empty Manhattan underpass. The rain poured in relentless sheets, hammering the roof of her sleek silver Rolls-Royce like fists on steel. Thunder rolled overhead, drowning out the sound of her designer heels clicking against the wet pavement as she stepped out into the storm. Mascara streaked her cheeks, her hair clung damp to her forehead, and for the first time in years, the powerful billionaire CEO looked fragile. Her phone was dead, her driver had been dismissed hours ago, and now she was stranded, alone. The city she ruled from boardrooms and skyscrapers seemed to have forgotten her in this moment. Passing cars above on the overpass hissed along, none stopping, none even aware that one of Manhattan's richest women was crying out for help in the shadows. Then a voice, rough, low, trembling, yet steady, emerged from the darkness. "I can fix it." Eleanor froze. She turned sharply toward the trash-strewn corner where the voice had come from. Out of the shadows beneath a soaked and tattered blanket, a man rose. His beard was unkempt, his clothes ragged and clinging to his thin frame. His hands, though calloused and dirty, looked strong. A homeless man. For a heartbeat, fear overtook her reason. She clutched her purse against her chest, stepping back instinctively. "Stay back!" she snapped, her voice sharper now, covering the panic in her chest. Her mind screamed with every prejudice she'd ever absorbed from a lifetime of privilege. He's dangerous. He wants something. This is a mistake. The man didn't flinch. He didn't lunge. He didn't even look offended. He just lifted his chin slightly and pointed at her car. "Pop the hood." Eleanor blinked. The audacity stunned her. Rain dripped down her face as she tried to regain control of the situation. "Excuse me. Do you even know?" But her voice trailed off. Something in his eyes stopped her. They weren't desperate eyes begging for spare change, nor threatening eyes filled with malice. They were steady, determined, eyes that had seen too much to waste words. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't asking. He was offering. The silence stretched, as thunder cracked above, shaking the ground. Eleanor's breath came out in a shiver. Against her instincts, against every ounce of her pride, her hand moved to the latch. She pulled the hood release. The man stepped forward slowly, rain plastering his shirt against his back, every step echoing with dignity she hadn't expected. He leaned over the Rolls-Royce like it wasn't a car worth more than everything he owned, but simply a machine, a puzzle he could solve. From the doorway of the underpass, a pair of cab drivers slowed to watch, their headlights briefly illuminating the surreal tableau, the billionaire heiress trembling beside her luxury car, and the homeless man ready to repair what her wealth couldn't. The narrator's voice cuts in. She thought she was about to be robbed, but what he gave her that night would be worth more than all her billions. The stormy night in Manhattan was only the surface of what had brought Eleanor Drake and Jamal Rivers into the same underpass. To understand why this moment mattered so deeply, you had to know the lives that collided there. One gilded in power, the other buried in shadows. Eleanor Drake had never been powerless a day in her life. Born to the Drakes of Wall Street, she grew up in penthouses where her lullabies were the rise and fall of stock tickers. She was the girl who never heard no, the young woman whose private tutors shaped her into a deal-maker before she could even drive. By 35, she had carved her name into the tech world, buying startups, dismantling rivals, and building a billion-dollar empire. In boardrooms, her reputation was legendary, sharp, unflinching, merciless when it came to business. But in private, she was brittle. Distrust had become her armor, loneliness her silent companion. She knew how to command a room of investors, but she didn't know how to ask someone to stay. She believed, truly believed, that money was the measure of worth. People without wealth, without power, without status were invisible to her. They weren't part of her world. And until tonight, she had never needed them. Jamal Rivers had once belonged to a very different world. At 25, he had been a rising star in mechanical engineering. He could dismantle an engine blindfolded, design a circuit board from scratch, or fix a broken machine with little more than his hands and intuition. People said his mind was a blueprint, wired for creation. But life doesn't always honor talent. A drunk driver had taken everything from him in one violent instant. His wife, his little girl, his home filled with laughter. In the aftermath, Jamal unraveled. Depression wrapped around him like chains. Addiction, grief, and the cruel indifference of the system shoved him down until the streets claimed him. Yet, even in the depths of homelessness, Jamal's hands never stopped working. He scavenged broken radios from dumpsters and coaxed them to life. He fixed children's bikes left abandoned in alleys. He repaired watches no one else wanted. People in the shelters would bring him anything broken, and Jamal, with grease-stained fingers and haunted eyes, would restore them. When he worked, he felt alive. The one thread that tethered him to himself was something his mother had told him, long ago when they were still in their small, warm house on the edge of the city. She had been a nurse, worn down by endless shifts, but her wisdom never wavered. You can lose your house, your job, even your pride, she had told him, pressing his little hands between her own. But if your hands still work, you're never truly useless. It was a mantra that kept him breathing on nights when the cold bit deep and the world treated him like trash. Whenever he bent over some forgotten machine, Jamal would murmur those words under his breath. It was as if his mother's spirit steadied him through every screw, every wire, every bolt. Now, on this storm-drenched night, those two worlds, Eleanor's marble towers and Jamal's rain-soaked alleys, crashed together. Eleanor, the woman who thought money solved every problem, found herself helpless. Her $1 million car was dead metal in the rain. Her expensive clothes were ruined. Her phone useless. She had never felt so exposed. And from the shadows rose Jamal, the man she would have dismissed as invisible, unworthy, irrelevant. When he said, "I can fix it," she recoiled, not just from him, but from the absurdity of the idea. How could someone like him fix something she owned? Her instinct was fear, insult, rejection. But as Jamal lifted the hood of her car, something in his posture betrayed more than just survival. His hands moved with confidence. His eyes narrowed, with focus. And softly, almost to himself, he repeated the words that had carried him through years of loss. You can lose everything. But if your hands still work, you're never truly useless. Eleanor didn't understand the weight of that line yet. But before the night was over, it would become the key to unraveling everything she thought she knew about worth, about power, and about herself. The storm showed no mercy. Rain hammered the cracked asphalt of the underpass, running in rivulets around Eleanor Drake's soaked heels. Her silver Rolls-Royce, the pride of her collection, sat motionless with its hood gaping, open like a broken crown. The woman who once commanded boardrooms with a glance now stood powerless. Mascara streaked, her umbrella collapsed uselessly in her hand, and beside her, half hidden beneath the car's hood, was a man she would never have chosen to depend on. Jamal Rivers, gaunt, unshaven, his jacket no more than a rag soaked through, moved with a calm precision that seemed out of place. His hands, though weathered, were sure and steady, tracing wires, tightening bolts, checking connections as if they had memories of better days. Eleanor crossed her arms tightly, her designer silk blouse clinging to her skin. Her eyes narrowed at him, suspicion and pride rising together. You can't possibly know what you're doing, she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut through the storm. Jamal didn't flinch. His voice came out steady, quiet but sure. Metal is metal. Engines don't care about bank accounts. They see you. Words struck her like a slap. For someone who had built her life on the gospel of wealth and power, the suggestion that her billions meant nothing to the machine, and to him, was almost insulting. She opened her mouth to retort, but stopped. The steady hum of the storm drowned her certainty. Above the underpass, headlights blurred across the slick streets. A pair of cab drivers slowed, leaning over the bridge railing to watch. One muttered. To the other, "That's Eleanor Drake, the tech queen. Look at her, standing there while some homeless guy's under the hood." They chuckled in disbelief before shaking their heads and driving on, leaving behind only the dripping silence of rain and tension. Eleanor caught their stares, her jaw tightening. To be seen like this, reduced to reliance on a man she wouldn't have allowed into her lobby, was humiliation of the highest order. She stepped closer, voice clipped and icy. "Hurry up. I'll pay you for your time." Jamal straightened slowly. Water cascaded down his beard as he turned, meeting her gaze fully for the first time. His eyes, dark and unwavering, weren't pleading. They weren't ashamed. They were calm, steady, anchored. "I'm not doing this for money." The refusal stunned her. Nobody refused Eleanor Drake's money. Ever. The idea that a man wrapped in a rain-soaked blanket would decline it rattled something inside her chest. "Then why?" she asked, her voice betraying a flicker of uncertainty. Jamal lowered his gaze. Back to the engine, his hands resuming their work as though her question had been expected. "Because it's broken, and I can fix it." Simple words, yet heavy with meaning. Eleanor felt them echo inside her in a way she couldn't explain. He wasn't asking for approval or gratitude. He was declaring his worth in a language no amount of wealth could erase. Her instinct was to pull rank, to remind him of who she was, to regain control. But the words stuck in her throat. She stood still, rain plastering her hair to her face, watching his soaked hands move with unshakable focus. He checked a wire, adjusted the clamp, and murmured almost to himself, "Engines don't quit. People do." Eleanor frowned, her arms tightening across her chest. "Where did you learn any of this? Don't tell me you just picked it up on the street." He glanced at her briefly. "I studied mechanical engineering once, before life had other plans." There it was. His truth, dropped without bitterness, just quiet fact. The realization unsettled her more. She had assumed he was simply another faceless man at the margins. Instead, he was a man with history, education, and skill, the kind of person her boardrooms would dismiss with a wave, the kind of person she had dismissed 1,000 times before. Her lips tightened. "So, what happened? You ended up here." Jamal's hand stilled for a moment on the wire. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Life broke me, took everything, but my hands still work, and if they work, I'm not useless." The phrase stirred something buried deep. A flicker of respect, or perhaps guilt, pressed against Eleanor's chest. She pushed it down quickly, wrapping herself tighter in pride. Engines don't care about bank accounts. The phrase replayed in her mind, gnawing at her. For years, she had treated money as the measure of all things. Yet, here she was, helpless despite her billions, and the man keeping her from being stranded in the rain had nothing but skill and resolve. Her phone sat dead in her bag, her driver unreachable. She had no choice but to rely on him, and that truth twisted like a knife in her pride. Lightning cracked overhead, briefly illuminating his face, lined, weary, but concentrated. For a moment, she saw not a vagrant but a man who belonged somewhere else, in a workshop, a lab, a garage where people respected the way his hands gave life to broken machines. The engine flickered, then dimmed again. Jamal muttered, "Almost. There." His focus unbroken. She shifted impatiently, rain dripping from her hairline. "Just get it done," she said sharply, but her voice lacked its usual edge. He smiled faintly, not at her words but at the engine's response. "Machines take patience. You can't rush them. You listen. You feel." He tapped the frame gently, like coaxing a child to breathe. Eleanor tilted her head, the irony hitting her. This man, whom she'd assumed had nothing to offer, spoke about engines with the reverence she reserved for million-dollar negotiations. It was absurd. Yet it was real. Finally, he tightened one last bolt, his shoulders relaxing. "Try it now," he said, stepping back. Eleanor hesitated, her pride warring with reluctant trust. She slid into the driver's seat, rain dripping. Down her wrist as she turned the key. For a moment, only silence. Her heart clenched. Then, the engine roared to life, smooth and steady. The dashboard lights glowed bright. Gasps echoed softly from two pedestrians who had stopped to watch. One murmured, "He did it." Eleanor gripped the wheel, stunned. The humiliation of dependence melted into something more confusing, relief, gratitude, even awe. She turned off the ignition, stepping back out into the rain. Jamal stood there, soaked but composed, arms crossed, no trace of triumph on his face, only quiet certainty. "You're welcome," he said simply. For once, Eleanor Drake had no clever retort, only silence. The rain continued to fall, but the storm inside her had just begun, because she realized it wasn't just her car he had fixed, it was her assumptions, her certainty that wealth defined worth, and that was a repair she hadn't asked for, but might need the most. The Rolls-Royce's engine roared to life, steady and sure, shaking rainwater off the hood like a beast waking from slumber. For a moment, Eleanor simply stood frozen, her manicured hand still resting on the steering wheel. Her breath caught in her chest as though she'd forgotten how to exhale. It worked. Against all odds, against the impossibility of the situation, it worked. She stepped out slowly, her heels splashing into shallow puddles, and stared at Jamal. He stood there soaked through, clothes clinging to his wiry frame, water dripping from his beard. The underpass lights cast his silhouette against the glistening pavement, and for the first time, Eleanor saw him not as a shadow, not as a vagrant, but as a man standing tall in his dignity. The storm around them seemed to soften, but the storm inside her, pride, confusion, gratitude she didn't want to admit, raged on. Eleanor straightened, defaulting to the armor that had never failed her: money. She reached into her leather clutch, pulled out a sleek silver card, and held it toward him like an offering, like a shield. "Take this. It's—" She hesitated, embarrassed by her own awkwardness. "It's more than enough for your trouble." Jamal didn't move. His hands stayed by his sides, fists clenched, loosely as though steadying himself against the insult. His eyes locked onto hers, calm but unyielding. "Keep it," he said softly. Eleanor blinked, startled. "What?" I said, "Keep it." His voice was firm now, like the rain itself had carried away hesitation. "You think that's all I need? Money? That's the one thing I can't fix." Her hand faltered. The card trembled between her fingers. Nobody had ever refused her money before. Not partners, not employees, not family. It was unthinkable. Her voice cracked with incredulity. "What do you mean?" Jamal let out a breath, a sigh that carried years of buried weight. He stepped closer, the hum of the repaired engine filling the silence between them. His eyes, no longer avoided hers. They pierced through. "I can fix machines. I can fix wires, engines, gears. But I can't fix this." He tapped his chest, his hand lingering there, pressing against his heart like a wound. Eleanor felt the air shift. The rain kept falling, but his words made her skin prickle with something colder, heavier. "What happened to you?" she asked. Softer now, curiosity piercing her arrogance. For a long moment, Jamal said nothing. His jaw tightened, his eyes glistened with stormlight. Then, slowly, he spoke. "My daughter," he began, voice trembling. "She was 5. Brightest smile you'd ever see. She loved machines, too. Loved watching me work." His lips quivered into a broken smile. "We built toy cars together from scraps. She thought I could fix anything." Eleanor swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. "But one night," Jamal continued, his voice lowering to almost a whisper, "a drunk driver ran a red light, took her mother, took everything, and I couldn't fix it." His hand pressed harder against his chest as though the memory itself was clawing its way out. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the storm seemed to hush. Eleanor's silver card now hung uselessly in her hand, trembling. Jamal's voice grew firmer, weighted with truth. "Money couldn't bring her back. Money couldn't heal the hole inside me. You can't buy healing. You can only live it." The words shattered something inside Eleanor, like glass breaking in slow motion. For years, she had believed that money was the ultimate repair kit. With it, she bought power, security, influence, and loyalty. Yet, here was a man who had nothing, telling her with unflinching honesty that wealth was powerless against the most human of wounds. She staggered back a step, clutching her chest as if the storm had struck her directly, because, suddenly, she saw herself, not as Eleanor Drake the billionaire, but as Eleanor Drake the woman who ate alone, who woke up to empty penthouses, who drowned loneliness in meetings and mergers. Jamal's brokenness mirrored her own. She lowered her gaze, the words tumbling from her lips before she could stop them. I have everything, and yet I can't fix my life either. Her admission shocked even her. She had never bared weakness aloud, not to friends, not to family, not even to herself. Yet, in front of this stranger, in front of a man soaked to the bone in rags, it felt safe. The sound of the car's humming engine filled the underpass like an audience listening. Jamal tilted his head, studying her, the corners of his lips, softening. Then, maybe, Eleanor whispered, almost as if confessing, we fix what we can, together. The words hovered between them, fragile, dangerous, yet undeniable. For a moment, Jamal said nothing. He only looked at her, really looked, as if peeling away her armor of wealth to see the lonely woman underneath. And then he nodded, just once, slow and sure. Together, he repeated, his voice low but steady, like the promise of a foundation being rebuilt brick by brick. Lightning flashed, illuminating their figures. An elegant billionaire in soaked silk and a homeless mechanic with calloused hands. Worlds apart, yet bound by brokenness, standing under the same storm. In that fragile silence, Eleanor realized something she never had before. It wasn't money that fixed lives. It was a connection. It was dignity. It was the courage to share pain and the grace to listen. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel quite so alone. The Rolls-Royce purred softly as it glided through the rain-slicked Manhattan streets. Eleanor's hands gripped the wheel tighter than she expected. She, who had commanded boardrooms worth billions, now felt nervous glances stealing toward the passenger seat. There sat Jamal, his ragged jacket still soaked, his eyes heavy but steady. For the first time in years, someone sat beside her without needing anything from her, without pretending. They pulled up to the Haven Street shelter, a squat brick building glowing faintly under dim lamps. A few residents loitered near the door, smoking, shoulders hunched against the storm. When Eleanor stepped out, the world seemed to pause. A billionaire? Here? With him? The shelter staff at the desk nearly dropped their clipboard when she walked in, her expensive heels clicking against the tile. Whispers spread like sparks in dry grass. Eleanor didn't wait for explanations. She looked the staff in the eye and said, loud enough for every ear in the hall, "This man saved me tonight." Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Jamal shifted uneasily under the weight of attention, unused to praise, but she didn't falter. That night, she didn't leave him with just, "Thanks." She left behind her card, not a token of payment but a promise. The world expected her to move on, but she didn't. When Eleanor Drake arrived at the shelter again, she wasn't draped in designer gowns or stepping out of a Rolls. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a simple jacket. No cameras, no entourage. Just her. Jamal blinked when he saw her, almost as though doubting she was real. "You came back," he murmured. "I said we'd fix what we could," Eleanor replied. "And I don't break my word." She sat across from him in the shelter's modest cafeteria, pushing aside a chipped coffee mug. Her voice was steady. "You told me machines don't care about bank accounts. My company builds machines, complex ones. We need minds like yours." He froze, confused. "You mean a job?" she said plainly. "Not charity, no pity, a position in my engineering division. You have a gift. You shouldn't be fixing scraps in the shadows. You should be building the future." Silence. Then, for the first time in years, Jamal allowed himself to smile. Not a polite smile, not the forced mask of survival, but a real, trembling smile of being seen. Word spread quickly in the shelter. Men who had once mocked Jamal's tinkering now clapped his shoulder. One grinned and said, "Knew it, he was always fixing things nobody else saw value in." Pride radiated through the cramped halls. To them, he wasn't just Jamal the drifter anymore. He was Jamal the engineer, Jamal the man who had shown up for a billionaire when no one else did. Later, in her office high above Manhattan's skyline, Eleanor confided in her assistant. a woman who had seen her shred rivals with words and dismantle competitors with contracts. But that afternoon, Eleanor's voice cracked with something different. Humility. "He taught me more in one night than any billionaire mentor ever has," she admitted. Her assistant frowned. "Taught you what?" "That money can buy silence. But dignity? That's earned." And I nearly forgot what that looked like. The admission lingered in the room, heavier than any balance sheet. The billionaire had found her lesson in a man the world had ignored. The homeless mechanic who could fix engines had fixed something far greater. The heart of a woman who thought nothing was broken inside her. And in that reversal, one humbled, one elevated, their worlds collided into something new. The weeks that followed felt like years compressed into moments. For Jamal, every morning was a shock, a test of whether this new life was real. He arrived at Carter Tech's engineering division in a pressed shirt Eleanor herself had insisted on buying. Him, his ID badge clipped proudly to his chest. At first, the engineers looked at him with curiosity, some with doubt. But when he dismantled a faulty circuit in minutes and redesigned a component that had been troubling the team for weeks, the room shifted. Respect doesn't come with a title. It comes with proof. And Jamal proved himself, again and again. With a steady paycheck and a place to stay, the fog of survival lifted. He began to dream again. The shelter he had once lived in was now his first stop after work, but not for a bed. Instead, he set up a corner with discarded parts, old radios, and bicycles, inviting the kids there to learn what he knew. His voice, once quiet, became the rhythm of drills and the clink of tools. "If I can fix it, so can you," he told them. And slowly, a foundation grew, a program that would one day teach thousands of homeless youth mechanical skills, giving them the power to build futures out of scraps. Eleanor's world changed too. Boardrooms that had once echoed with her sharp demands now began to hear new words. Dignity, opportunity, responsibility. She still closed deals with the same precision, but reporters noticed she was different. At press conferences, she spoke, not just of profits but of people, telling the story of the night a man with nothing showed her what she lacked. Soon, Carter Tech wasn't just known for innovation in machines, but for pioneering social programs, partnerships with shelters, apprenticeships for overlooked talent. Eleanor Drake, once a symbol of cold ambition, became a surprising champion of the invisible. It didn't take long for the story to leak. A passerby had captured a shaky video of Jamal in the rain, bent over Eleanor's Rolls-Royce while she stood nearby, stunned. The caption read, "Billionaire saved by homeless engineer." The clip went viral within hours. Millions watched as comments poured in. Respect the overlooked. Talent lives everywhere. And most often, no, I can fix it. Soon, talk shows called it the phrase that changed how the world saw homelessness. Politicians referenced it in speeches. Teachers wrote it on classroom boards. The hashtag spread far beyond Jamal and Eleanor, becoming a quiet movement of its own. For Jamal, the fame wasn't the reward. He walked through city streets and saw eyes soften when they met his. People who once crossed to the other side now nodded. Some even stopped to ask, "Are you the man from the video?" He always answered the same, "Yes, but there are thousands more like me. Go listen to them." And for Eleanor, the transformation was personal as much as public. Late at night, standing in her glass-walled penthouse, she sometimes whispered Jamal's words back to herself. "You can't buy healing. You can only live it." They were her compass now. Together, their lives, once so impossibly distant, had woven into a story that reminded the world that brokenness is not the end. Sometimes it's the place where rebuilding begins. She thought she needed an engine fixed, but what she found was a man who fixed her perspective. In the rain, under a broken bridge, a billionaire discovered that the hands of a homeless man carried more wisdom than all the boardrooms she had ever commanded. He could repair her car, yes, but he showed her something no money could ever buy. That dignity, once lost, can be rebuilt, and that respect is the greatest currency of all. True wealth is compassion, the choice to see value where the world turns away. True strength is resilience, the ability to rise even when life has stripped you bare. And true downfall is arrogance, the blindness that comes from believing money defines worth. Eleanor walked away from that night with more than a working car. She walked away humbled, transformed, and reminded that sometimes the greatest teachers come from the places society ignores. Jamal walked away not just as the man who said, "I can fix it," but as proof that broken does not mean useless, it means ready to be rebuilt. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more stories of Black excellence, justice, and dignity that change lives.